Welcome to the Private School Leader Podcast, where private school leaders learn how to thrive and not just survive as they serve and lead their schools. I strongly believe that it is possible to have a long and happy and fulfilling career as a private school leader. And my passion is to help you figure out exactly how to do just that, right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And I'm your host, Mark Minkus. So I want to start today's episode by giving you a scenario and then ask you to think about how you would handle this. But on today's episode, we're talking about trying to keep everybody happy. And I've certainly struggled with that over the years, trying to keep everybody happy. And so as we go through this scenario, just try and think about all the different people in this scenario and how on earth are we going to keep all of them happy. So the scenario is this. There's a star basketball player in your school, and he is the son of a board member. So we're off to a great start, right? So grade checks for eligibility for sports happened on Tuesday of a week, and the star basketball player, he had a low grade in Algebra 2. That means he's off the team until he gets his Algebra 2 grade up. Now, the basketball playoffs for the league that you're in start in 2 days, but he's off the team. And the algebra teacher, the Algebra 2 teacher, she has a test coming up that's supposed to happen tomorrow, but she has decided to reschedule the test for next week because she thinks the kids aren't ready and they need more time to relearn the most recent lesson and to review for the test. And so the parents of the star player are putting pressure on the Algebra 2 teacher to just go ahead and give their son the test because he's ready. Well, we don't know if he's ready or not. All of a sudden, he's interested in Algebra 2. You know how that goes. And so the test, she wants to move the test to next week. The parents want her to go ahead and give the test to the class or to him. And here we are. And so with this scenario, if we're trying to keep everybody happy, we could tell the Algebra 2 teacher that she has to give the kid the test and figure out how to facilitate that. And that makes the student, the basketball player, that makes him happy. It makes his father and mother happy. The mother is on the school board. It makes the AD at your school happy, and it makes the basketball coach happy. But if we decide to support the teacher and tell her, well, this is your class, you decide when you give tests, and I'm just going to support that, and that happens when it happens, and he gets his grade up when he gets his grade up, then you have a happy Algebra 2 teacher who feels supported, your faculty feels supported, and then also those Algebra 2 students are more prepared for the test. So it's impossible to keep everybody happy. And I know that for a fact because I tried for years to keep everybody happy. The parents and the students and the board and my teachers and my coaches and board members and just fill in the blank. I tried to keep everyone happy, and it's impossible, and it's also exhausting. It just doesn't work. So on today's episode of the Private School Leader Podcast, I want to remind you that you can't make everyone happy, so stop trying. And so before we jump into today's topic, I want to let you know about a free resource that I've created for you called the Top 6 Ways to Protect Your School from a Lawsuit. This is a 10-page PDF that will help you keep your staff and students safe and help keep your school out of court. Litigation is expensive and time-consuming and stressful, but this is a common-sense guide that can help you be more intentional and proactive when it comes to protecting your school. So you can go to theprivateschoolleader.com/lawsuit to grab this for free. It's called The Top 6 Ways to Protect Your School from a Lawsuit. Again, grab that for free over at theprivateschoolleader.com/lawsuit. And then I want to ask you a question. What is your biggest struggle at school right now? What is your biggest struggle at school right now? Well, I want to hear more about your biggest struggle, and I want to help you make it better. And I have an open coaching spot right now. And, maybe your problem is that you're feeling guilty that your family is getting what's left of you at the end of the day. Or maybe your biggest struggle right now is relentless parents, or a couple of teachers that can't get along, or that you just, no matter how hard you try, you just can't maintain boundaries between school and home. Maybe it's just that you're feeling overwhelmed at this time of year. Or enrollment is a huge stressor right now. Or maybe it's teacher morale. Whatever it is, I strongly believe that I can help you make it better. And so I'd love to hear more about your biggest struggle. I'd love to be your coach. As I said, I do have one spot open right now. And all you have to do is go to theprivateschoolleader.com/coaching. You can check out testimonials from more than 24 current and former coaching clients. And you can learn more about working with me one-on-one, or you can just shoot me an email at mark.o.minkus@gmail.com and say, tell me more. So again, I have a spot open. I'd be happy to work with you one-on-one, and let's jump on a Zoom call for 20 minutes for free and just hear more about what's going on with you and go from there. So it would be an honor to get a chance to talk to you. So like I said, on today's episode, we're talking about why you can't make everyone happy, and so stop trying. And so, of course, I'm not just going to leave you hanging. I'm going to give you some strategies, like I always do. But before I get into that, I want to talk about why we fall into this trap of trying to keep everybody happy. And then what happens when we try to keep everyone happy. And also, what is the cost of that type of leadership? I call that pleasing leadership, the people pleaser. And let's face it, a lot of us are people pleasers. A lot of us are peacemakers. A lot of us are just trying to get everybody to get along. And there's a lot of good in that because we're good at conflict resolution and we're good at helping to find the calm within the chaos in our private schools. But I think there's a dark side to being a people pleaser, and there's a dark side to trying to keep everybody happy. And so I want to kind of shine a light on those, the bad news first, but then I'm going to give you some strategies to try instead, and then I'm going to wrap it up by giving you kind of a simple reframe kind of question that you can use as a filter when you're dealing with this. So I'll take good care of you. But let's start by talking about why do leaders fall into this trap of trying to keep everybody happy. And most of this is me speaking for myself. Some of it is just an amalgamation of all of my coaching clients that I've worked with over the years. But I think one of the reasons that we try to keep everyone happy is we want to be liked. We want people to like us. And if we make people happy, they like us. And that's okay. But it creates some difficulties that I'll talk about in a few minutes. So why do we want to keep everyone happy? I think one reason is that we want everybody to like us. I think we also sometimes equate things being calm and peaceful with success. We sometimes equate a peaceful week at school, or keeping the peace, or however you want to put it, with being a good leader, with being a successful leader. And I'm really speaking about myself here. If I could keep the peace, if I can keep everybody happy, then for years I felt like that was me being a good leader. But that's just not true. because I said before it's impossible to keep everybody happy. And for years I thought that just keeping the peace, reducing the conflict, keeping everyone happy, giving people what they wanted, that was a sign of good leadership, and it really wasn't. And so I think another reason why we try to make everyone happy is that we don't want conflict with parents. We don't want conflict with our teachers. You know, it's uncomfortable when parents are upset. And so if we say yes to what they want and keep them happy, then we remove the discomfort. And I've certainly been there. I'm ashamed to admit it, but probably dozens of times, especially earlier in my career, when just to remove myself from the discomfort and the stress of a upset parent situation, that I would give in, and then I would try and keep them happy. But we'll touch on in a few minutes why usually when I would say yes to a parent to make them happy, I'm making someone else upset. Another reason why I think that we sometimes fall into this trap of wanting to keep everybody happy is because sometimes we mistake good leadership for keeping keeping people satisfied, or we see this as like problem solving, when really what it is that we're kind of just giving in to demands. And then another reason that I think that we try and keep everyone happy is that we're just trying to avoid complaints. You know, sometimes when we just are inundated with, we're the complaint department, let's face it, right? We might as well hang out a sign on our door that says, you know, suggestion box / complaints, you know, complaint box. We are we're the people who field all the complaints, get all the complaints. And sometimes that gets really, really old. We get fatigued from all those complaints, and sometimes we wish they could just slow down or stop. And so sometimes we give in and we people please and we try to keep everyone happy because we are trying to avoid complaints. And then I think one of the big reasons that we try and keep people happy is that if by nature, as a child, as a young adult, if it's in your personality to be a people pleaser and to keep everybody happy when you were a kid, when you were a teenager, when you're a young adult, then of course that's going to carry over to your leadership. So none of those are bad things in the sense that you're not a bad person, you're not a bad leader if you've done those things. This podcast is all about just being honestly assessing where we are, and then, okay, what do we do to get better? You don't have a time machine. You can't get in a time machine and go back and fix all the times that you said yes to something you shouldn't have said yes to just to keep the peace and to make someone happy or to get that parent meeting to end. We don't have a time machine. We can't go back. But what we can do is go forward and make sure that we're going forward in a way that is what's best for our school and not just trying to keep everybody happy. So then the second thing I want to talk about is what happens when we try to make everyone happy. So what happens to you as the leader when we try to make everyone happy? Well, I think we become inconsistent because we start making exceptions to our school policies. And so whether it's to do with sports eligibility or dress code or attendance, or maybe if it's the employee handbook and it has to do with PTO, or it has to do with how many classes someone's supposed to teach, or this person doesn't have any duties, or just whatever it is. It's a very complex job that we have. And I know that there are exceptions to everything, and that there are emergencies, and there are times when a family is going through an incredibly difficult period or even a tragedy, and the same is true about our teachers. But we have our handbooks and we have our policies for a reason. And so I'm not really talking about when it comes to kind of a once or a twice in a lifetime tragic problem that a family is dealing with. Of course, we're going to adjust. I'm just talking about as a matter of practice that us trying to keep people happy is we look like inconsistent leaders that are going to make exceptions. And so then what happens is our policies then become flexible depending on the person. Remember, I mentioned on purpose that the star basketball player that was the son of a board member. I mentioned that on purpose because it's like, you have big donors, you have board members, you have the children of teachers. It's tricky. It's difficult. But when we start getting flexible with our policies depending on the person, the other problem that happens is that we set a precedent that just becomes the new expectation. Because here's the thing that you and I both know. In our schools, I believe strongly there's no such thing as a secret in a private school. And so if you have a fourth grade parent and they're upset about a thing and they're complaining and you just want to make them happy, and so you kind of give in and give them what they want, but it kind of goes against the handbook, the other fourth grade parents are going to know about that. And now that just becomes the expectation that you're going to bend the rules and that you're going to make exceptions. And now we're in a bad spot because then they point out, well, I know for a fact that you blah, blah, blah with this family over here. Okay. And so another thing, and I think this is probably the most important thing that happens when we try to make everyone happy is that we lose credibility and we lose trust with our teachers. Because I don't know about you, but when it comes to keeping people happy, or when it comes to who makes me the most uncomfortable if I look back on my career, generally it's the parents that I would be giving into, and then I'd be going to my teacher and saying, hey, I know, blah, 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 and trying to get them on board because I've built trust, I've built a relationship with my teachers, and then I'm kind of making withdrawals from the trust bank account, if you will. And so I just believe strongly that when we are not consistent, when we're not predictable, when we make exceptions, when we don't follow our own policies, then we lose credibility, we lose trust with our faculty. And I think that when we try to keep everyone happy, we actually confuse everybody. When we try to keep everybody happy, we actually just confuse everybody. And so then one more thing before we get into the strategies, and that is I made a section here called the cost of keeping everybody happy, or the cost of people-pleasing leadership. If we're a people-pleaser, we're trying to keep everybody happy. What's the cost of that? The first thing is that I think we carry around an unbelievable and unnecessary amount of emotional weight. Because it is such a balancing act to be a private school leader and just try to get it right, even if you stick to the handbooks. Well, now, what I've been talking about is, yeah, we've got our handbooks, but now we're going to try and thread the needle while walking on a tightrope on a windy day when it comes to all these different stakeholders. And we're going to try and find this magical, perfect solution that's going to make everybody happy. That doesn't exist. But it's stressful and it's emotional, and then it feels crappy afterwards when the people who we have to upset by making this person happy when they let us know, hey, what's the deal here? So I think a cost of trying to keep everyone happy is you're carrying around a lot of unnecessary emotional weight, or another way of looking at it is you're expending a lot of emotional energy on this that you could be expending on something else. I also think one of the costs of keeping everyone happy is that parents learn that pushing harder will get them results. So let me say that again. If you develop a reputation as someone who is a people pleaser or someone that's trying to keep everyone happy, parents learn that pushing harder gets results. And that the first thing I think of is when you give a mouse a cookie, they want a glass of milk. It's not going to get easier. It's not going to happen less often. Word spreads, and now you've got more parents pushing harder to get results that they want, the changes that they want. And I mentioned this before, but it bears repeating. And another cost of this type of leadership when we're trying to keep everyone happy is just losing trust with our teachers, because we're not predictable. Psychological safety comes from our interactions with them, our relationship building, the trust that we've built, but it also comes with being predictable. Predictability creates psychological safety, which creates trust, which creates good teacher morale, which creates a good culture at your school. This can eat away at the foundations of the culture of your school or your division when we are trying to keep everyone happy. Really what it feels like to the people that we serve is that we're all over the place. And what everyone's seeking, I think, is clarity. And we're not giving them clarity and direction when we have policies and procedures and handbooks and a mission statement and a vision statement and a statement of faith if you're a religious school, and then we're just kind of not always following through on those. And another cost of leading this way is that I think it slows down the decision-making process. It becomes a lot harder. And I'm not saying that the decisions are easy when we have to follow our policies. But I am saying that when we take everything into consideration and we're trying to do this 8-dimensional calculus and solve this Rubik's Cube in the dark, it just slows everything down and it makes it that much harder. And then I also think you feel drained emotionally and physically because we never can really get this right, and it's never going to be enough. And it's not just that you're tired, it's that you're trying to do an impossible task. And then that impossible task comes with a price tag that we just talked about. And so the title of today's episode is You Can't Make Everyone Happy, So Stop Trying. And so I just painted a picture for you with why we should stop trying to keep everyone happy. And so I want to encourage you to stop trying to keep everyone happy, but it's like, okay, I got to give you something to grab onto. So what do we do instead? So here are the strategies. Here are the things that we can do when we feel that emotion start to rise in us where we want to just keep someone happy. Number one, let's anchor our decisions in our mission and not in emotion. Anchor decisions in mission and facts and handbooks and policies, not in emotion. Easier said than done, I agree. But we need to anchor, that's the key word in this phrase, we need to have an anchor. The anchor keeps that boat from, it goes a little to the right, a little to the left, a little forward, a little backwards, but it's anchored. So you have a little bit of flexibility, but we have to be anchored to something. It can't just be in the moment that we're making a decision, depending on our emotions, depending on the time of day, depending on how tired I am, depending on whether or not I'm sick, depending on whether or not I had an argument with my wife that morning. Like, if we allow all of these outside factors to impact our decision, I know from experience, I'm going to give in. I need to be anchored to something. And another thing you can be anchored to is follow your handbooks. You have spent a lot of time and effort and came with precise language with your family handbook and your employee handbook. Don't take all of that work and throw it out the window. If we have clear handbook policies, and we've made that we've communicated to the families that this is the expectation. We've communicated to our teachers this is the expectation. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying that can be our anchor. Our mission, our vision, our employee handbook, our family handbook can be our anchor. Now, if something comes along and you're like, boy, this is a bad policy, or this is a this or that, okay, that's something where a thoughtful process you can undertake to perhaps in the future change the policy. But for this year, once you're in the school year, unless it's something egregious as far as a mistake that was made with one of your handbooks, your handbook is what it is, and we're going to follow that. We're going to be anchored to it for this school year. And then we can make changes in the summer if necessary. So strategy number 1 is to anchor decisions to mission, vision, and our handbooks. Number 2 is to be consistent even when it's uncomfortable. And so, again, easier said than done. I agree. But we're going to try to be consistent even when it's uncomfortable, and that actually is why it helps to be anchored to something. Strategy number 3 is to communicate the why clearly. I think sometimes in these conversations that we have with stakeholders, when we're feeling that urge to kind of give up and give in and just try to keep the peace and try to make everyone happy and just try to get everyone to get along and whatever story we tell ourselves, I think sometimes we need to make sure that we're communicating the why clearly. So policies and handbooks, I mentioned that before, that's kind of our anchor. Those don't exist in a vacuum. There should be a why, a compelling why, a clear why behind the policies that we have. Those are typically tied to the mission and vision of the school. And I'm not saying you need to over-explain the why, but if the conversation is becoming uncomfortable and the teacher or the parent or the board member or whoever it is that you're talking to just really doesn't seem to, quote unquote, get it, they're attacking the rule. That's a stupid rule about sports eligibility, or that's a stupid rule about dress code, or that's a stupid rule about PTO for teachers, or whatever it is, that there's a why behind what we do. And sometimes it helps not to justify yourself, not to try to convince yourself or to convince them or talk them into why this has to be the way it has to be, but to communicate the why clearly sometimes does help. Okay, strategy number 4, with going from trying to please everyone and make everyone happy to a different type of leadership. Strategy number 4 is we just need to accept that disagreement is part of leadership. Again, easier said than done, but being a good leader means that people are going to disagree with you. Think about it this way. If everyone agrees with every single decision that you make, I'm not so sure that is not a good thing, because there's so many different perspectives and so many different angles and so many different people with so many different priorities that if everyone was happy all the time, I kind of question, what are we doing here? So if we accept that disagreement is part of leadership, yes, there's discomfort that is attached to it, but it's part of the gig, okay? Strategy number 5 is to separate listening from agreeing. Let me give you that again. Separate listening from agreeing. So you've heard me talk a bunch about how to have a meeting with a parent, and then you listen, and then you say, well, first of all, and then what do? You've heard me say it before. You validate their feelings, and you acknowledge their concerns. Validate their feelings, acknowledge their concerns. And you can do that all the live long day and not agree with the thing that they're saying. This is also true with teachers, or true with a board member, or true with a donor, or a person in the community, whatever the case might be. Separate listening from agreeing. We can listen, we can empathize by validating their feelings, acknowledging their concerns, but we don't have to agree with their point of view, and we don't have to give in to the thing that they're asking or the thing that they're demanding. So let's separate listening from agreeing. And then strategy number 6 is to focus on what's best for the whole school, not just the individual. Focus on what's best for the whole school, not just for the individual that's in front of you with a red face, or the email that you're reading and it's got capital letters and exclamation points, or the person on the phone that's raising their voice. it's really hard not to think about and only think about the individual, the person, the teacher, the parent, the board member, the donor, the student that's right in front of you that's really upset. But we need, as leaders, to focus on what's best for the whole school or what's best for my division, and not just what's best for this person who's upset. And there's stuff going on the inside. We feel that stress, we feel that anxiety, we feel our heart rate pick up, and we feel our blood pressure rise because it's hard. And especially if you have a tendency to be a people pleaser, it's difficult to not just make everything peaceful, not just smooth down all the ruffled feathers and make sure that everybody's happy. Sometimes that's difficult. So one last thought is just a simple reframe or a question that you can ask yourself. So instead of asking yourself, will this decision make people happy? Will this make this person happy? You ask yourself, is this right for our school? So let me give you that again. Instead of the default being, will this make them happy? Or will this make the person upset? We're going to take it out of the realm of the person and their reaction. And we're going to ask ourselves, is this what's best for our school? Is this what's right for our school? Is this in the best interest of the children at our school? And what it does is it helps us shift from being reactive and emotional in that moment to being more intentional and reflective and proactive. And usually we're on much more solid ground when we're intentional and proactive and reflective and curious than if we just react. Okay? And this question, instead of asking, will this make this person happy? If we instead ask, is this right for my school? Is this right for the kids? Is this what's best for the kids? It does help to take the emotion out of it. And whenever emotion shows up in our decision making, a lot of times it doesn't really, in the long term, that is not the best thing. And I also believe that asking ourselves this question, is this what's best for my school, that it will build long-term trust with your faculty, with your team. And I'm not saying you ignore parents, but I just know from my own personal experience, and you've probably experienced it too, man, when a parent gets really upset, I've given in to keep that parent happy, and then I got to take that long walk down the hall to go into that teacher's classroom and say, hey, and tell them what I agreed to, or tell them what I changed, or tell them what I said that what I promised. And I can just see in their face that they're disappointed in me as the leader because I went against policy. We're human beings, and so this is going to be tricky, and we're not going to get it right all the time. And so that's why I'm suggesting that we try to have some strategies and or a question that we can return to. So to wrap it up, what are the strategies to go from trying to keep everybody happy to making better decisions? Well, we're going to, number one, anchor those decisions in our mission, not in emotion. Number two, we're going to follow our handbook policies, family handbook, employee handbook. We're going to try and be consistent when it's uncomfortable, even when it's uncomfortable. Sometimes we recognize we need to communicate the why behind the policy. We're going to just accept that disagreement is part of leadership. People are going to disagree with us. Probably the most important one is strategy number 5. We're going to separate listening from agreeing, and we're going to validate the feelings of the person who's upset. We're going to acknowledge their concerns, but we're not going to give in and just try to make them happy. And then we're going to focus on what's best for the school and not just what's best for this one person that's in front of us. And one way to do that, and this is your call to action, and that is the next time that you feel yourself just drifting into that area where you're going to make a decision just to keep someone happy, is to ask yourself, is this right for my school? Is this what's best for kids? And then go from there. It's not going to be easy, but it's definitely worthwhile. And I know that you can do it. And so just a quick reminder as we wrap up, I do have a coaching spot open right now. I'd love to hear more about your biggest struggle at school right now. Shoot me an email, mark.o.minkus@gmail.com. And you can check out more about coaching at theprivateschoolleader.com/coaching. And then also I have a free gift for you called the Top 6 Ways to Protect Your School from a Lawsuit. And you can get that for free at theprivateschoolleader.com/lawsuit. And I appreciate you. I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to join me here today. And I'll see you next time right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And until then, always remember to serve first, lead second, and make a difference.